I've had 2 weeks with the xTool D1 Pro. Here are my thoughts. Okay, so I know 2 weeks isn't a lot of time, but so far, I'm impressed. I knew there was going to be some huge potential with what I could actually do with this thing, but the actual results of some of the things I had in my head turned out way better than I'd expected. So in this video, I'm going to go over the xTool Creative Space software, the actual xTool D1 Pro with the 10-watt laser, the air assist, and the xTool enclosure with the vent in. I'm going to talk about all of those, tell you my experience with them, and whether they work, whether they don't, and whether I recommend them if you're looking at getting a laser. So with that, let's get into it. So overall, the Creative Space software works really well for the integration between the computer and the xTool. As design software, it's super basic. It has no extra bells and whistles and only the absolute basic of functionality in terms of design software. Where it does really well is clearly with the integration in sending the work to the xTool. That portion of it, I'm really happy with. So if you're coming from experience with professional design software like Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator, specifically for vector formats, you're going to notice the lack of features and the lack of workability with it right away. So there's a software called Lightburn, which is way more popular to use for laser engraving. It is a paid software. I don't have any experience with it, but from what I've heard and the reviews I have watched about it, it is definitely the pro level software, more in line with things like Adobe Illustrator. So I'm going to actually show you the software, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, how I use it, and how it actually interacts with the laser when you go to send a job to print. So in order to get comfortable with the software, I decided to create some test files. So I created all these graphics in Illustrator and then imported it into Creative Space in order to create these test files. I first started by making these directly in Creative Space first and quickly realized the software's limitations, which is then when I jumped over to Illustrator to create all of the graphic that you see here. Now, the one thing I did keep in here to try it out was the text here. So this big block of text is done in Creative Space, and you can see here, it's all within this tiny little box here. This is one of the limitations of the software, is that its interface with design obviously is not great. This text, I should be able to click right here, edit it, get all of the space in properly within this window, but I can't. I have to edit it in this small little box over here. That's not great. This is an example of one of the limitations and frustrations that you would have with this software if you're trying to design something like you see right here. So for me, I just simply laid this whole thing out in Illustrator, got all of the boxes laid out, got everything organized nicely, imported this as an SVG into Creative Space, and then all I had to do from that point is set the parameters of each one of these boxes. So you can see this is the engraving test tab that I have within this file, and you can see the 3 different colors here. These colors represent the different layers on the file. So the green is everything I'm going to have cut. The red is my text, which will be engraved. And the blue is also going to be engraved because this is an engraving test. So if I click on this little box right here, it represents a speed of 400 millimeters per second and a power of 20%. That's reflected over here in our processing window. Speed is 400, power is 20. So this is where I actually really like this software. This is all your inputs for the actual machine with power, speed, number of passes, lines per centimeter, which is basically like your definition. And then the engraving mode, this is how the actual laser engraves onto your workpiece. So does it engrave everything in one pass from left to right, or does it engrave it going from left, then engrave going back, and back and forth until the whole thing's engraved? It gives you a different pattern in the actual engraved piece. But this is where I really like the software. It's super easy, super simple. It keeps all of the controls easily accessible, and it is certainly, as you can see, it's not overcrowded. So in this regard, this section right here is really good. I like how it's nice and clean and simple. But again, coming back here to the text, when it comes to layout and all of that, it's you can see here if I drag this around, it's snapping to all sorts of different points. So you can see the number jumping around. It's like, where is this thing trying to snap to? It's very difficult to align objects easily with this level of snapping. So another example here, we can see this is our cut pattern for this little panel. If you want to keep it, you can see the cut settings, it's power, speed, and number of passes. Super simple. You can also choose to ignore it or send it for the output. This is really handy. So by default, I have all of the cut patterns set to ignore so that you can just engrave this onto a piece of leather and then see how it looks. You don't actually have to cut it out. All you do to activate it is click onto output, and it already has the settings built right in. So this is an example of one of the files you're going to get if you actually download my test files. One thing that is missing from the kind of processing tab is a job history. So it'd be really nice if you could actually see all of the different tests that you've run, as well as the time it took to run that file. So jumping over to a working file here, the only other thing that's missing is the absolute coordinates feature or the origin point. By default, once we click start, we can see that the origin point is either the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, or any one of the points shown here. So how that translates over here is that the origin point is in either of the corners, the center, or the middle points. But there's no relation on your software to the actual print bed. I have figured out a way around that. If you need to always have your laser come back to the same point, let's say you want to engrave something, move the piece, and then bring it back and engrave it again. I do have a way around that, but I'll leave that for another video. So to actually print this file, once we have our artwork all set up, we have our layers, engraving, all of that is all set, and we know our settings are how we want them. You click start. We can go ahead and actually click framing first to make sure that our artwork is actually going to fit on the leather piece. We can set our proper origin points, click start, hit the start button on the machine, and let it work. I'm actually going to show you that process right now. So with our artwork loaded up, I'm going to start by framing our workpiece. This ensures that it's actually going to fit within the piece of leather that we have. So if I just click start, you can see the laser goes around the whole pattern, and you can see if it's going to stay within the leather. Now, I do have a paper template here of this printout that I've laid onto the workpiece, and then I line it up with this center dot, and then I know this is actually going to fit on that piece of leather. Then I'll just position this here. So nothing's on right now except the actual xTool. I have a power bar down here which controls the fan, which you can see, and the air assist. So that's the hose, the air assist going around, which is all down here, connect to a power bar. I'm going to flick on that power bar now, and you're going to hear all of that fire up. So that's the fan going, exhausting out the window. And then I'm going to turn on the air assist. And that is the full volume of everything going. Once the lid's closed, I'm not sure how well the audio on my phone picks that up, but it mutes it quite a bit. So that's kind of the working volume of the actual xTool. And then once the laser gets going, there's a little bit more, but it's actually not that bad. You can carry on a conversation in here with little trouble. So that is the, turn this down, turn this fan off. So that's the actual process. Once that's framing is done, we hit complete, hit start, come back over to the machine, hit the button, close the lid, and then it starts running. So the D1 Pro is definitely a solid machine. It does not feel like a hobbyist machine. It feels like a professional level machine. In terms of the processing time, I was actually impressed with one, how quick it was, but I was also surprised with two, how slow it was. Kind of both. So in terms of cutting, it actually it's way faster for a 10-watt laser than I was kind of expecting. For example, I just released my latest stitchless wallet design called the Samos wallet, and it took just under 5 minutes to engrave and cut out that entire wallet. This ended up working perfectly because after I got the first wallet cut out, I was then able to sand down those edges, get that prepped while another one was in the machine, getting cut and engraved. And that pre-finishing process of all of the edges took nearly the exact amount of time it took to cut out and engrave that one piece. So I was able to dual work at the same time, making it very efficient. Now, normally I would not compare a laser like this to, say, a clicker with dies for the same type of job, because there's no way the laser is going to be able to keep up with a clicker. It's put the die on the leather, click, it's done, that's it. But you have to click out each of the pieces individually, and you can't do anything else while you're using your clicker press. But with the laser engraver, while one of those is working, I can be working on another piece. So I think in the end, in this type of application, it may end up being about the same or faster than if I had bought in dies for my clicker press. This is one of the things that surprised me, was how efficient that whole process can actually be in terms of production running on a machine like this. I didn't think this 10-watt was going to be able to handle something like that, but now that I've done it, it actually could handle some lighter production work. The part of it that did surprise me was when I ran the test files that I just showed you. Those took about 10, I think just over 10 minutes to run each one, which is a little longer than I was expecting. But considering that I'm running that test file on low speeds to test that low speeds, it kind of makes sense. But I was surprised how long those test files did take to print. If I remember correctly, it was about 10 minutes. But again, I don't have a job history in the Creative Space software, so I'm not able to reference that time frame. Specifically regarding the cable management, you can see here I have the hose from the Air Assist tied to the actual main cable here, and that is to keep this cable down and organized out of the way so it goes out to that grommet hole properly. When I didn't have this attached, it would rub on the plastic up here, so this way keeps it down, it's nice and secure. I like how that turned out. The actual main cable I now have running along the bottom here, so that in use you can see this folds nicely and it stays out of the way, and the cable doesn't hinder the movement of the machine at all, even to its most extremes right out to the edges, which I haven't used so far. The main gantry, I've rerun all of that as well. And you can see the cord runs nicely perpendicular to the main gantry. The only other thing regarding the hardware itself is the actual mechanism that connects the laser to the gantry itself. It's controlled by this little knob right here, which locks it all down, and then this thing moves up and down to adjust the height of the diode itself. Let's see if I can do this one-handed. So if we loosen that off, this then moves up and down, and you can see it isn't the smoothest, and then to lock it, we just press that down. So this mechanism itself is nice, it functions smoothly, but this dovetail in here, I don't know whether it's the anodized aluminum rubbing on itself, it's just not a smooth process to adjust the height of your laser. And that's very important because that's the focusing laser, or that's the focusing distance of the laser. So you flip down this little metal piece, it touches the work surface, and then you move this up and down until that's just touching that surface. So the whole process is a little clunky, and then the arm itself actually has to touch the workpiece. So sometimes it can actually get in the way and mark up the leather, and it's not great. So let me see if I can show you what I've been doing to remedy that. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. It's very awkward to attempt to film this, but my lever that's right here, I'm gonna loosen that off so that I can move the laser up and down. So normally you just adjust this down until that little metal bar is just touching the leather itself. But one problem I found with the honeycomb platform is if you go right in between one of those honeycombs, you actually indent the leather and then you're focusing too close. So what I've started doing is actually coming off the edge of the leather. So if we come off the edge of the leather and just lower it down till that arm drags on top, and then raise it up until the arm clicks down, and then I lock down that laser head. That seems to be a good way to get the height adjustment where it's not indenting or marking up your leather. Also, there is built-in Wi-Fi. That's the Wi-Fi antenna, which works with the Creative Space software. I don't use this. I actually have a hard USB running to my computer. So if you want to use Wi-Fi, apparently it only works with Creative Space software and not Lightburn. So the air assist, if you want clean cuts and as little charring as possible, this thing is absolutely necessary. I was really surprised at how effective it was at keeping the charring down and keeping the debris off of the actual laser head itself, keeping it running more efficiently long term. I started off by running it at kind of half power and still noticed some charring in the first few tests. Quickly realized, put it on full, let it go. There's no charring at all. It's amazing what it does. No masking is required. I have seen some reviews saying that their air assist for the xTool didn't come with the dial. Mine does, so I don't know whether they maybe had older units that they didn't include that adjustable dial. The unit I have does have it. Now keep in mind, I only use it on full, so I don't really need that dial adjustment, but it is handy to have as a more convenient on and off switch when I'm between jobs, because it does make kind of quite a distinct sound, especially when it's shooting on the honeycomb platform. So it's nice to turn that off, having everything else on when you're between jobs before you get the next one going. I showed you the air assist nozzle, and I've got it connected up over here, which is a big improvement. Let me show you the actual unit itself. Is right below the machine, and that air hose is coming right into here, and then the power comes up to this cable and then plugs into this power bar, which I control on and off so that this isn't always running. The problem here is this dial the dial that controls the airflow itself has about a 14-inch length cord from the power bar. This is a huge problem. Like if I didn't have that here and this was plugged directly into the wall, this would be useless. I recognize this cord is probably standard, but there's a huge room for improvement on this piece right here. So just pointing that out, that's a bit of a, this is potentially a game changer for some people, depending on how you have your cables all set up. This can kind of make or break how effective this thing is. Now, I always use it on full, so it really isn't that big a deal. I could turn the power bar on and just let it go, but it is kind of nice to leave everything else running and then just turn off the air assist. For example, after I'm done cutting a piece, I leave this closed and let the fan run to exhaust any fumes. At that point, I come down here, turn it off, quiets everything down a little bit while the fumes are exhausted from that last job. And then just quickly showing you the amount of dust that gets onto the workpiece easily wipes off. So with that air assist, there's no need for masking. The leather stays perfectly clean, and it's just a very, very small amount of dust that easily wipes off with a soft rag. So no need for masking tape on the leather, potentially ruining the surface. It stays perfectly clean. The only thing that's needed is to clean up the bit of residue on that edge, which you're going to be sanding anyways, so it's no extra time needed to clean these pieces up. The enclosure, absolutely necessary if you aren't in a big garage space or studio space with lots of ventilation, this thing does an amazing job at one, pulling out the smoke, and two, almost more importantly, getting rid of the smell once you're burning through that leather. Because keep in mind, it sounds kind of gross, but essentially you are burning skin. That's really what we're doing here. So it doesn't smell the best. It's not a raw smell, but it definitely is a bit of a char smell. So if you can exhaust that out of the room you're in, it helps. I have a very short distance from the xTool to the window, so the fan fortunately doesn't have to work that hard to exhaust all of those fumes. There is a small amount of smell that does come out. I don't think there's any way to really avoid it, because with this closure, it is not fully sealed. You're gonna have some fumes, some smell that does come out, but it's only really noticeable, honestly, within like 6 feet of the machine. Outside of that, you don't really smell it, at least in this room that I'm in. It's getting sucked right out the window. It does a really good job. Because the fan itself is just a small little computer fan, sometimes when I'm cutting out a full piece, like on the Samos wallet that I did, when I would lift up the leather after the job was done, there was actually smoke sitting underneath it in the honeycomb platform. A few times, having the lid up, pull that piece away, the smoke rises right up. So the fan isn't powerful enough to just suck that right out. What I learned to do is just lift the lid up halfway, move the piece, put the lid down again, and then the rest of those fumes will get sucked right out in another minute or so. So I don't think any extra power is needed. I've seen some people buy auxiliary motors or fans, big kind of huge units they attach to this hose to help exhaust it even further. That's not necessary in my case, but again, this is pretty close to the window. So if you're running a further stretch, maybe this hose doesn't reach all the way to where your ventilation is, you may need that additional power, because again, it's just a pretty small computer fan. It's actually doing all the work to exhaust that air. Okay, so overall, I'm extremely happy with this entire setup. Now, I didn't pay for this setup. So would I be happy if I spent the $1,000 on this that it would have normally cost me? Yes, it's absolutely worth the investment. I would have spent this had I not reached out to them and ended up getting the whole thing for free. I'd planned to spend about that. If I had gotten this in the mail, I would have been very happy with the results that I've been getting so far. Now keep in mind, I'm using this in a leatherworking studio, so all of my recommendations are for a leather worker. I haven't tried cutting anything other than leather, engraving anything other than leather, and I don't really plan on doing it because my focus with this is obviously leatherwork. So my recommendation, if you're looking for a laser, whether it's hobby or professional, which is what this is a great machine. I can see the potential for it. But that's if you're in the market for a laser. If you already know you want it, you know you want to do things with it, would I recommend this? Yes. If you're on the fence with it, would I recommend it? Well, that all depends. If you're a hobbyist and you're just doing this on weekends, you're not selling your products, you're doing this for fun, if you have the money, sure. There's so much you can do with this and have so much fun with, why not? You don't need this to do leatherwork. If you're a hobbyist, you're doing everything by hand, you don't have a clicker, do everything by hand. You don't need this. It's completely unnecessary. Get this if you want to have some fun. Now, if you're a smaller maker, larger maker, whatever size you are, and you're looking at this as a business investment to help you produce product or other leather goods, yeah, I would recommend it. I can see the potential for this, but there's also some caveats there. If you already have a clicker press and you have dies for all of your products, this will not speed up that process. Even I would even say, even with a larger laser, you're not going to produce your wallets faster if you already have a clicker and die set, because that's efficiency. There's no way. It takes you seconds to click out a wallet piece, minutes to click out a full wallet, and then it's ready to go. To do a full wallet on this is going to take 10 minutes to laser out all of the pieces. Now you do have your logo lasered in there and all that, but it's also a different look than a cold stamp or a hot stamp if you're doing all of that. But you do have to look at it. If you don't have a laser and you don't have a clicker, if you're looking which one do I buy, that's a very difficult question to answer, because they're basically in the same price point, except with a laser, with an xTool, you spend $1,000 all in and you're set. You don't need anything else. With a clicker, you spin that and you get your clicker. But you also need your dies, and those dies are done. Once they're made, if you make any changes, that's it. With a laser, you can change all the time. I don't have any dies. I have dies for one product, and that was for a corporate order. Don't have dies for my wallets because I'm constantly refining that design. I'm constantly doing things that are new. That's just me. So a laser for me is more efficient than having a clicker press, even though I do have one. So if you're looking at this from a business perspective, you have to really seriously consider the types of products you're doing and how efficient you're trying to do it. If you're busting out, a few hundred keychains, a clicker may be more efficient because you can do it faster. But then you have to put your logo on all those. Or are they all custom logos for different brands that you're doing them for? Then maybe the xTool is better because you can actually laser all of those out and do their custom graphics, and you can dramatically increase your turnaround time because you don't have to wait for the dies. And you're not stuck with that single logo. It's a very difficult question to answer as to, in terms of a business decision, whether you need that. It's something you're going to have to decide for yourself. But do I really like this for what I've used it for so far? I absolutely love it. And as it stands right now, I am really happy with the 10 watt laser. I don't really see needing a 20 watt or the 40 watt, especially if I'm just working with leather, because I don't know how that increased power is going to affect the charring or burning on the leather, which is paramount. I don't mask anything. I don't have an issue with any charring. You saw that me just wipe off that dust. I don't have to mask. I don't have to worry about tape. I don't have to worry about impacting the finished side of the leather because of that tape. I really like the 10 watt laser. But in time, I may upgrade, see what that 20 watt does. Maybe it will be faster as long as it doesn't char. Right now, I'm sticking with the 10 watt. So if you've been on the fence whether you want to invest in a laser machine, I hope this video has helped you. The xTool links below are affiliate links for me, so I do get a small percentage if you end up making a purchase through those links. That is the same with my Amazon links. Those are also affiliate links. So it goes a long way to helping support the channel. If you want to see some daily updates of what I got going on in the studio, what I'm using this for, some of the cool things I have coming up, go follow me on Instagram, norfolk.handmade. And if you'd like to support me directly, you want to purchase one of my products, head over to my website, norfolkhandmade.com. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you in the next one.